the League of Women Voters of Greater Green Bay, welcome to our very first virtual forum, totally virtual. My name is Karen Schley, and with the help of many League members, as well as our tech specialist, we have worked very hard to organize this forum. Many go-to meeting practices. This type of event is happening in this manner because of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the safety concerns it has caused. Going forward, in order to educate the voters during this busy and important election cycle, forums will need to be handled in this way. Participants in this forum are coming in and entering from different screens. Therefore, the size and square of the screen you see may vary. It is not intended to give one person more coverage than another. We are getting many questions in, but if you still have a question you would like to submit, please go to LWVGGB forums20@gmail.com to submit a question to the candidates this morning. The chat feature is not being used during this event. Thank you to the two Democratic candidates from the 90th Assembly District for participating today. We have incumbent Representative Stash Grzinski and challenger Christina Shelton, a member of the Green Bay School Board. The winner of the August 11th partisan election will face their opponent, Republican Drew Ketziker, in the November 3rd general election. The League of Women Voters recommends that all league forums fall within the FCC's regulations and will only allow audio video of this broadcast to be broadcast in its entirety, except the media reporting on this event. For the 90th Assembly District Forum, we have partnered with the Appleton League of Women Voters to have a guest moderator. I would like to thank and introduce Jackie Klemaszewski. Jackie is the Director of Voter Education and Turnout for the Appleton League of Women Voters. She is also this year's recipient of the Meg McLean Award for Advocacy. We are very fortunate to have her with us today. Jackie?
Thank you for the introduction, Karen, and thank you for the opportunity to moderate the forum this morning. And welcome to our candidates, Mr. Stash Grzinski and Ms. Christina Shelton. Our gratitude for taking time today to share your viewpoints with our voters. And I also want to send a thank you to all the members of the audience here, our virtual audience, for caring enough to be informed when you cast your votes in the elections on August 11th. A reminder, this is a forum, it's not a debate. It is for information for voters. So we have some prepared questions. We are in fact question rich. They've been coming in fast and furious. So we will start with those. And as Karen mentioned, there's the website, and you should have the website on your screen at all times. So if you think of a question, you can email it to me. We encourage you to submit the questions, but please understand that if questions are inappropriate, if they're aimed at one candidate only, if they have nothing to do with the public office that we're talking about, or are questions that kind of begin with an opinion ahead of time, they'll either not be used or they'll be rewritten to be appropriate. We do want to get at the issues without some of the rhetoric that goes around those issues. A League of Women Voters of Greater Green Bay member will sort and group those questions and consolidate questions so we can get as many topics in our hour as possible. So there may be some revision if we want to compress those into one question. So for the opening, introduction, and closing comments, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and that is monitored by our timekeeper. And I hope you can all see our green screen with the 2 minutes on it. After the opening, then there will be 90 seconds to respond to all the other questions. And we'll have a little pause in there between those times because our timekeeper needs to make a little shift. So I'm going to alter the order that I ask the questions to one candidate and then the other, so that everybody has a chance to go first and be last. Before the forum started, they drew lots, and we are going to start with Ms. Shelton. And so the timing starts after I have asked the question, but this first one is really, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, Ms. Shelton.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. And thanks to all of you who are tuning in and watching from the safety of your home. For the past 20 years, I've dedicated my life's work to public service, education, and community building. I currently serve as the Vice President on the Green Bay School Board. I'm a mom of 2 young kids and a wife to a fantastic husband. Through all of the things that I've done in my life and in my experience, one thing remains clear. When we work together, we can solve our most pressing issues with courageous solutions that will improve the lives of all of us and in our communities. There is no doubt that right now we need leaders who will step forward, stand up, and speak out. We are facing unprecedented times. 3 crises loom: a global health pandemic, the highest unemployment rates in recent history, and a reckoning of the destructiveness of racism. And our current reality has given us a new sense of clarity on what we must do to build and uphold the laws and systems that not only protect us, but also uphold the core belief that we're all in this together. I'm running because I'm the strongest candidate in this race. The truth may be difficult, but it is important to accept. I'm the only one who can fully do the job. I'm the only one who can fully work with the Assembly and the Democratic Assembly Caucus and in committees, and I'm the only one who can build the types of relationships needed to bridge what divides us. That person is me. Stasha's behavior is completely inexcusable, and we don't need to dwell on that, but the 90th needs to move forward. We don't have time to waste. Our representation is on the line. The issues we face, from the calculated defunding of public education, climate change denial, and unprocessed unemployment benefits, these issues require a seat at the table and a real voice in Madison. I love this community, and I show up for this community, and I'm going to continue to show up for this community. I ask for your support and your vote on or before August 11th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. We'll just give the timer a second here, and then Mr. Grzinski, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Excellent. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event in this form and making sure that it happens and we can get this out to the voters of Green Bay. I'm happy to participate today. Just listening to my opponent's opening remarks here, I just want to set the record straight. I have a 100% voting record on the floor of the state assembly. I have never stopped representing the people of Green Bay. That claim is political hyperbole at its finest. During my time in the state assembly, I've been proud to be able to reach across the aisle and get results for Green Bay, because that's how things get done in the state assembly. Unfortunately, the Assembly Democrats are fairly deep in the minority. There's only 35 in the caucus right now, and they're all lovely people, but unfortunately, they can't pass a single bill by themselves. You have to be able to reach across the aisle. You have to be able to work with others in the assembly, and I believe I have a strong track record of that in my first term. I've been able to work to expand the COVID-19 response and pass a bipartisan bill that we were able to lift the Medicaid restrictions here for some folks in our community, as well as working after the disastrous election here this April to make sure that I could introduce a bipartisan elections bill to help expand voting rights here and make sure that more people can participate in our process. And then also working to make sure that we could move the coal piles downtown and start that conversation and work on a bipartisan bill to make sure that we can improve our environment and our economy. I am the candidate in this race with the legislative track record. I served on the county board for 6 years before being a state legislator, and I'm proud of that record, and I'm proud to have your vote on August 11th.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. And now we'll have our timers set to 90 seconds. And I have a ton of questions here dealing with the issues. And so our responses here should just be about what you think about the issue. And we'll focus on what you will do, what you think. And if we're all set, we're going to start with Mr. Grzinski. So
Excellent.
please identify 3 key challenges that require action. And what are your plans within the Assembly for addressing them?
Yeah, so what we continue to hear from the voters of Green Bay and what we continue to hear into our legislative office every day is that we need a strong COVID-19 response. We passed a bill this April that started to address some of those issues. I mentioned we lifted some of the Medicaid restrictions. We are also able to make sure that health insurers can't deny claims because of positive tests. I think that's really important. And also able to lift the 1-week waiting period. But there's more to do to address COVID and those problems. Also, I continue to hear that we need to fix the roads in Green Bay. We need to send back more funding back to the city of Green Bay to make sure that we have a safe transportation system here. I was proud to be able to work through the state budget process and fight for more road funding back to the city, which included a 10% increase for both road funding and transit to the municipality. And then finally, we need to expand healthcare opportunities. We need to take the federal Medicaid money. I hear consistently from constituents that they're struggling to pay their bills, especially when it comes to healthcare. We need to take those federal funds, especially when we're looking at what could be a $2 billion deficit moving into this next session. I think it's incredibly important. But I'd say those are the 3 big issues that I continue to hear about from the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. And Ms. Shelton.
Thank you. Such a great question, Jackie. Thanks for bringing this forward. So I think the first thing is we've got to have a great plan for our elections moving forward in 2020. You know, the Assembly put forward a bill in April before Mr. Grzinski's bill came forward in May that actually went beyond Mr. Grzinski's plan. It ensured an absentee process where ballots were mailed directly to people's homes. It removed the voter identification, and it also removed the signature that was required on ballots. So it's important to remember that there was actually a more robust plan, and I'm excited to support that bill and to work with the Assembly once I'm elected. The other piece here is healthcare. You know, as people are losing healthcare, we had over 60,000 Wisconsinites lose healthcare in the first 3 to 4 months of COVID-19. And it shines a light on the gaps that we're seeing and the needs that we need to highlight in healthcare. We need to be passing the Healthcare Heroes Act, which would take the Medicare expansion. It would ensure that our healthcare workers have paid sick leave and are covered if they get sick. But we've got to recognize that the tie for people's employment to their healthcare is a system that is broken and something that is not working. And lastly, unemployment. We have over 500,000 people who have still unclaimed unemployment into the Department of Workforce Development. This is something that Mr. Grzinski hasn't been available to learn and be able to understand and respond because he's not in the caucus and neither is his staff. So I'm excited to be able to work with our constituents and hear their voice and make sure we file those claims.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. So you both brought up some very important issues, and there are going to be some issues coming up later that you've talked about, but you'll have a whole 90 seconds to talk about that in a little more detail. So Ms. Shelton, you are going to be starting this next question. I'll see the timer up there. What professional experience do you have outside of politics and elected office that could advance your service as a state legislator?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important that we talk about experience from a broad, comprehensive view rather than just from a typical politician lens. You know, again, as I said in my statement, the 20 years of my professional and personal career has been dedicated to public service. I started off as a public school teacher where I taught health and physical education in both middle school and high school. I've taught at the higher ed levels as well. And then I've also worked at a national nonprofit working with urban school districts around the country to work on issues around wellness policy, working with the USDA, the CDC, to ensure that schools and districts and communities are taking actions that create healthier learning environments. More recently, I have been working at the local level on environmental, economic, gender, and racial justice. I have a deep connection to Black Lives United and to Women's March Wisconsin. So I have been a strong advocate for these deep issues that a lot of politicians, quite frankly, have not had the courage to speak out about. I'm the only one here of the two candidates that spoke out about George Floyd's death. I'm the only one who's been able to talk about the issues that serve in our community and how it impacts marginalized communities. And I'm the only one who talks about the intersectionality of our political issues. We need someone in Madison who understands this community and works with our community members in a way that doesn't center ourselves as the politician. My approach to the work once I'm elected will be to elevate these voices, to build a longer table, and to pull up more chairs, because that's the way we're going to solve our issues.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Krasinski, your response to professional experience outside of politics and elective office.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So for almost a decade, I worked for an environmental conservation nonprofit here in Northeast Wisconsin. I sat at people's kitchen tables. I heard their stories about their drinking water being affected. I heard about mines moving into their backyards. I heard about their problems with PFAS in their drinking water and the contamination. And we worked together to build a plan to help engage those folks to work in their communities, but then also to reach out and talk to their legislators. It's one of my earliest actions into the political process here, and really working with community members and citizens across both Green Bay and Northeast Wisconsin to help get them to be engaged, to help build community involvement, but also to help protect them from some of the environmental contamination that we see throughout Wisconsin. And because of that work, I've been really proud to take those actions down to the state legislature. I've been proud to work to pass clean water bills in my first session. I believe that work is critical to the voters moving forward here, but it's really the base of my engagement with our community.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. You will start the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe the state of Wisconsin has a role in business development in downtown Green Bay?
I do believe they have a role in business development in downtown Green Bay. So many times when we see these projects where the state can come in and be helpful, it's either money on the back end or it's money on the front end to help kick off a project. I was proud to be able to pass a bill in the State Assembly, a bipartisan bill that would help to fund some of the coal pile relocation. That's an issue that we've heard about for over almost 50 years here in Green Bay. When I first started knocking doors in neighborhoods along the river here in Green Bay, you'd see some of that coal dust on the siding, and people had concerns about it. They had concerns about it for their health. So I'm excited about that funding passing the Assembly and us working together to move forward to try to make that a reality, to make sure that those piles aren't around those neighborhoods, and it can be an economic driver for the city of Green Bay. Also proud to have supported the Green Bay packaging development as a county supervisor. Good paying union jobs, 100-year-old company here in Green Bay, the kind of investment that we need in our community, unlike the bad investments we've seen from the state like Foxconn.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. Ms. Shelton?
Yes, thank you. This is a great question, especially as so many of our small business owners have been completely gutted from the COVID-19 response. And this is something that hits home for us here. There are a number of small businesses. They are the backbone of our community and the backbone of our economy here. And it's close to home for me personally. I have a number of friends who run small businesses and have struggled over the past 3 to 4 months to make ends meet. I think the state has to do a better job helping people take the risk that is in front of them when they're trying to start a small business and to grow that business into a real success. I had a good friend of mine. She's a Black woman. She had one of the only Black-owned businesses here. It was a soul food restaurant here. And watching her work, hours, I mean, her whole family, watching them work hour upon hours to make ends meet, really highlighted for me that we have to do more, not just for all small business owners, but especially lifting up the Black and Brown community members and our minority businesses as well. This is a way that we can lift people out of poverty, that we can bring them into the American dream, that we can build community partnerships. And I think that there are definitely ways that the state can do that through grants and special small business loans, in ways that, you know, we can work with our local elected officials as well. But absolutely, we should also be thinking about good paying jobs, union jobs, and ways that workers can have opportunity to work with these small businesses as well to gain valuable experience.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. And you're going to start our next question here. During the April election, Green Bay saw wait times of up to 4 hours to cast a ballot. How do you believe the state should conduct an election during a pandemic? And would you change any current laws?
Yeah, thank you for this. I sort of mentioned this a little bit in my first response. Again, I'll sort of revisit that. There was an assembly bill that was introduced at the beginning of April that would cover elections through 2020, that would send ballots directly to people's homes, that would remove the voter ID law, and would also remove the signature requirement for the vote by mail requirement. So this bill is fantastic. I think it's a common sense bill. It also allows for those who can't do vote by mail. There would be in-person options for those folks. So it really meets our needs. It meets our needs. And it is a robust bill that we need to be working across the aisle to pass. This will ensure that people can vote safely in the safety of their home, and that we can also increase voter turnout, which is good for democracy. I want to point out here, because this is something Mr. Grzinski brought up in his opening statement, that his bill that he brought forward in May was quite confusing. And I'm not sure if maybe he didn't know about the Assembly bill because he's not in caucus and perhaps he wasn't aware of it. But his bill actually only covered when the governor had his emergency safer at home order. And it was perplexing because his bill came forward on May 13th, or I'm sorry, the order was lifted on May 13th, but Mr. Grzinski's bill came out on May 18th. So that bill really seemed like it was more for optics, full well knowing that there is a good, strong bill that supports elections and voters that the Assembly had already worked on.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Grzinski?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And talking about the Assembly bill that was introduced. Unfortunately, I don't think my primary opponent has done her homework on this bill. The bill that was introduced would have violated the National Voter Registration Act. It would have eliminated same-day registration. And there is no way that I could put my name on a piece of legislation that removes same-day registration. So what I did was I worked with my Assembly colleagues. I reached across the aisle very shortly after the April election. I reached out to Representative Joel Kitchens, and we went to try to find a place where we could find agreement, where we could come together on a bipartisan bill that could be introduced. You know, after the April elections, folks from each party ran to their political corners. They didn't want to talk about the real concerns that we had. So we introduced a piece of legislation. It wasn't easy, but we found some good points together that we could talk about, and that was improving absentee ballot applications sent out statewide, making sure that we remove the witness signature in that piece of legislation as well, making sure that clerks had the tools to administer an election during a pandemic, and then making sure that we had more transparency in the process and rebuilding the state system for tracking our ballots. I'm really proud of that legislation and the fact that the Wisconsin Election Commission has already taken some of those points.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. And this next question, we're going to start with you, but this is these questions are meant for you to answer from your perspective. So now, again, COVID, given the current state of affairs in the country, including the ongoing pandemic, what voter outreach efforts would you, are each of you doing as candidates to ensure that even without the public in-person events, that your constituents' voices will still be heard?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So far, our campaign has, we haven't done any door-to-door contact. I think that's really important with the current health system and the numbers that we're getting from the state right now. I mean, we're seeing almost 40,000 cases now here in the state of Wisconsin. We want to make sure that we're doing this in a safe and secure way for the voters of Green Bay, that we're getting our message out. We have a very, big digital presence. We've got a Facebook page where we're putting our message out as well. Folks are going to see some of our communications in the mailbox. They have seen that already. And then we have volunteers and myself that, we're dialing voters. We're talking to them on the phone about their real issues that are, facing the citizens of Green Bay here. And those conversations have been great. I really, as a candidate that's done this work for several different cycles, I actually miss the face-to-face conversations with the voters at the doors. I think you learn a lot about your district and the people you represent by having that contact. But until we believe it's safe, we're not going to engage that way. And we're going to continue to run a campaign that is both safe and secure for the voters of Green Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. Ms. Shelton?
Thank you, Jackie. Our goal with this campaign is to meet voters where they are. What I learned in my school board race, then I won last year for that seat last spring, was that you've got to find where voters are, you've got to meet them where they are, and you've got to talk to them in a space that allows for a robust, honest conversation. I am incredibly proud of the campaign that we're running and the way that we are reaching voters and the innovative ways that we're reaching voters to sort of rip away this facade that we're just asking for their vote. We're not just asking for their vote. We're asking to hear their voices, to hear about their key issues, and to bring them into the movement that we're building. Because I had mentioned, when we work together, we will solve our most pressing issues. Some of the things that I'm most excited about is we have texted over 8,000 constituents here. We're using a program where we can engage with folks, and we know that texting is a great way because it's a nice informal way to chat with people. People are more likely to respond. They're more likely to sort of engage in a conversation. We've been making phone calls, which has been fantastic as well. Even calling people that we know who are already voting and already support us, letting them know that we're there for them and asking if there's any other key issues. Of course, we're asking everyone who can to request an absentee ballot. We're doing Facebook and social media and other digital to encourage people to do that. And that's something that I'm really proud of too. We've done a robust Facebook Live series where we talk about issues and encourage people to vote on before August 11th.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. And we're going to start with you on this next question. Still on COVID-19 has destroyed the state budget, along with many local government budgets. It will take more than one revenue source or budget cut to make up the shortfall. So what are a few ways the state can deal with this shortfall in 2021?
Yeah, this is a significant issue, and we've got to be looking at all the possibilities and all the ways that we can close this budget. I'm going to start off by sharing a statistic that I find to be quite appalling. There are 8 billionaires that currently sit and live in Wisconsin. Of those 8 billionaires, they collectively made $14.2 billion in collective net worth in the first 3 months of COVID-19. So there are people in industries that are making money hand over fist, while the rest of us suffer and wonder if we're going to get our unemployment benefits. We've asked working families in this community and in the state over and over to step up, to do their part, to make sacrifices for the better of the state. And they have done that, and we have done that over and over again because we know it's for the good of the people. But we've got to go back to our most wealthy and ask them to do the same. It is completely inequitable, un-American, and not true to our Wisconsin values that these people can make this much money in the first 3 months of COVID-19 while the rest of us look to cut budgets, to cut social programs, key services that people rely on every single day to get by. that money can go not only into the budget, but also to extend our services to ensure that the Department of Workforce Development isn't waiting and working for 5 months to refund people, to get people their unemployment, to ensure that we have health care when people need it the most, to give the money to our public schools when they're facing additional costs for returning in the 2021 school year.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Krasinski?
Yeah, I think there are a few different ways we can go about addressing this. This will be one of the biggest things that we face as a legislature moving forward in this next term. How we work together as a state legislator to solve these issues. So I go about it in a few different ways. One, I think we need to expand Medicaid into the state. We need to take the federal dollars that are coming in. We also need to stop backfilling the program. Currently, we're backfilling the program with about $300 million of state revenue. That's money that can be spent on our schools, can be spent on our roads, can go to small businesses for COVID response. There's a lot of different ways that we could spend that money. Also, we should look at seriously about closing the dark store loophole in this state. That's something I supported throughout my first term. We should make sure that businesses that are being successful are, paying their fair share as we move forward here. And then also, I would look at capping the manufacturing and agriculture tax credit. For far too long, that program has given out money specifically to the biggest corporations in the state who aren't sending any money back to the state of Wisconsin to help maintain our infrastructure, rebuild our roads, and that's incredibly important. But those are the three things I think we should take a hard look at in this next state budget.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. And you will start the response to this next question. So with the number of COVID-19 cases growing daily in Wisconsin, do you feel that mask wearing should be mandatory in public areas when social distancing is not possible?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So we're looking at a situation where we've almost had 40,000 cases now here in the state of Wisconsin. And because of the Republican legislature suing the governor over our COVID-19 response, we've now seen a situation where municipalities and counties are left to a patchwork. They're left to do this by themselves. I fully support us as a state listening to our healthcare professionals on this issue. I believe that those are the folks that should be driving us as a legislature to act, listening to the DHS secretary, listening to the CDC recommendations as we move forward here. And their best recommendations are that when we're in those situations, we should have a mask on. We should make sure that we're socially distancing in public. So I'm all about making sure that we follow those recommendations and that we do it collectively as a state instead of leaving this patchwork network across our communities where you don't know if you go into one city if they have the same rules as the other. It's incredibly unfortunate right now with the way this has been rolled out in the state. But yes, if our healthcare professionals say that is the direction to go, I'm all with them.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. Ms. Shelton? Well, we'll just, there we go.
Wait for the time.
Ms. Shelton, I think whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, as a person, as a public health official, I have a background in public health and community health education. I've been thinking deeply about this issue. We can all agree that wearing a mask is one of the easiest ways that we can prevent disease transmission. It's a way that not only keeps ourselves safe, and it's a way that it keeps others safe as well. We absolutely need more guidance from the state and from our locally elected officials on, what the expectations are for wearing masks. I think we should be asking folks to wear masks as often as they possibly can. And I know there are businesses that are asking people to wear them and declining that service if people don't wear them. At the city level, there is discussion of an ordinance coming forward requiring masks. And I would absolutely support that. But I do not support a punishment-based public health policy where we would require the police to enforce that and to give tickets. We know from the statistics at our state and local levels who typically gets caught up in those ticketing and who gets caught up in that process. And to spell it out, it is our Black and Brown community members, it is our disabled community, and it is people with mental illness. So, you know, what I would like to see actually, and this is a good place to talk about reinvestment, is to reinvest in our community and county health departments. If we do require a mask, they should be drafting that, they should be looking at public health policy, and they should be working to enforce it, but they need more money to do it, and I think we should be investing in them.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. And so you will start the next one, and I know we've touched on this just a little bit earlier, but here we have a little more time to expand. We continue to hear stories about people waiting countless weeks for unemployment. At the end of this month, the federal PUA program will be done. What will you do to help fix and address the unemployment backlog?
Well, one is I'll be able to actually be in caucus and in committee work, and so will my staff once I'm elected. You know, the Department of Workforce Development meets regularly with the Assembly caucus, and so that is critical. You know, you cannot advocate and inform and help your constituents if you don't have up-to-date information on how the system is performing. So that's the first thing, is knowing what is happening and being able to meet their need. You know, there are 500,000 people who haven't received their unemployment. There was just a story this morning in the press, in the newspaper, talking about a man who is, you know, I believe living in his car because it's been months. So this is not something that is outside of, you know, what we see every day. This is decimating communities every single day as we wait. And we can look to the divestment from the Workforce Development Department. You know, we've got to upgrade their computer system. We've got to put more money into staffing. And that's not just from a COVID-19 response. We've got to be investing on that in the front end so that when we face an unprecedented health crisis like we are now, that we have the system in place to be able to respond rapidly to ensure that people are not going months and months without being able to pay their bills. So that's what I would do. You know, I've had a number of constituents here who have reached out to me because, quite frankly, they've reached out to Representative Grzinski and they haven't gotten answers. And they've called me crying, literally crying, because they don't know when they're going to get their next unemployment check. And I find that appalling. And I'm excited to be able to represent them when I'm elected.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Grzinski.
Yeah, so this is a huge issue that we're facing right now with unemployment benefits. My office is helping people every single day. We work with the Department of Workforce Development liaison to pass and help folks file their claims. It's something that you know, my staff has dedicated countless hours to. We filed with Workforce Development over 100 claims now, just I believe in the last month and a half. This is something that we are working hard on every day for the citizens of Green Bay. But we also need to talk about the fact that we've got a broken system in Madison. You know, I was proud to be one of the first legislators to call for the 1-week waiting period to be removed. I was proud that we were able to do that in the bipartisan April COVID bill that we were able to pass. But we still need to go back and remove some of the issues that were put forth during the Walker administration, and making sure that DWD has all the tools they need. Earlier this week, we were literally in our office calling around to shelters to help someone who has not received their PUA yet, to try to make sure we could get them placed, because they unfortunately had lost their housing. This is something we're helping folks with every day in the office. We have all of the tools to do it, and we really need to make sure that DWD has the tools they need.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. You will start our next question. Do you support the Healthcare Heroes Act, and what plank of the act is most needed, and would you add or take anything out?
Yeah, I do support the Healthcare Heroes Act. And first off, I want to thank all of our frontline workers. I want to thank all of our nurses and doctors and folks that are putting themselves on the front lines every day for the citizens of Green Bay, they're risking their lives for us. And so thank you. I really appreciate that. And I know Green Bay appreciates it as well. With the Healthcare Heroes Act, we've got to make sure that our frontline workers have paid sick leave. It's something I support. We've got to make sure that they have all of the PPE they need to make sure they can do the job. And then also, they deserve hazard pay right now for this work during a pandemic. Those are three main planks of the bill. I signed on to the legislation that was put forward in the state assembly. I think it's something that we should come back as a state assembly and meet again and address. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that sort of action out of our Republican colleagues yet, but it's an incredibly important bill that we need to move forward for our community and for our healthcare system here, right here in Green Bay. The governor's been able to put $40 million from federal funds into our healthcare system, but we need to do more as a state legislature, and I'm excited to tackle that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. Ms. Shelton?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited when I saw this this come forward. The pillar of this bill is the Medicaid expansion, and this goes beyond supporting our healthcare workers, which step up every single day, doing their job in the face of adversity, putting themselves at risk and their families at risk. But this extends it, right, for all of us. And so I think that's really a key part here is, again, when we tie our health insurance to our employment, we see how, quite frankly, ridiculous that is. So that's a fantastic piece of it. Obviously, the paid medical leave is important, the hazard pay, the ability for the state to fund COVID-19 testing and treatment. I know of people, healthcare workers here, who have told me they can't access and or afford a COVID-19 test due to their schedule, due to their family barriers, and due to being able to not being able to afford it. The healthcare or health insurance coverage, I just think is the most important thing here. But again, I was excited to see this. I'm excited to see where this goes forward. But we've got to also be thinking broader and more long-term, because this COVID-19 situation and pandemic is going to continue to unfold quickly. Information unfolds rapidly. But I think this gets us to a very, very good place.
Thank you. And Ms. Sheldon, we'll start with you in this next question. So in a State of the State address, Governor Evers declared 2020 to be the year of clean drinking water, and the Republican speaker created the bipartisan water quality task force. What, if any, of the recommendations do you think should be implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. The Clean Water Task Force was a tremendous success coming out of 2019. It produced 10 bipartisan supported bills. It was the first package of bipartisan bills on water quality in over a decade. And the work that came forward from those bills are just incredible. And they really set a new standard and a new vision for water quality in Wisconsin. We see it here locally. The question of turning on your tap water and can you drink out of your tap? Is the water safe? And I'm excited that I have received the endorsement of the Wisconsin conservation voters to help me navigate this once I'm elected to the assembly. Knowing that they stand with me and stand with clean water is a tremendous win. Mr. Grzinski served on the Clean Water Task Force. He attended the meetings up through December before he was removed for sexually harassing a worker in the Capitol. So it's great that he attended those meetings, but unfortunately, once he was removed from that committee, he was not at all involved in drafting of the bills. He was not involved in, he was actually the last legislator to even know that the bills were even coming forward. He wasn't even invited to the press release when those bills came forward. So generally, I would say I'm excited to pick up the bills where they are and to be the person who can move those forward to ensure safe drinking water for all Wisconsinites.
Okay, I need to interject here again that I would like, I appreciate from the league's perspective that you only speak about yourself and what you would be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Mr. Grzinski, clean drinking water.
I appreciate the question. It's something that I've been passionate about in my career to try to address for the citizens of Green Bay and Northeast Wisconsin. I participated in the task force that traveled all around the state of Wisconsin. For countless hours, we sat in hearings in every corner of the state. we were able to cover in a tremendous amount of ground. I believe there's 14 hearings that we had all across the state of Wisconsin, and every place we went, we heard about a different issue. If we were up in Marinette, we heard about PFAS contamination. If we were down in Southwest Wisconsin, we heard about some of the nitrate issues they were having. And when we were in Milwaukee, we heard about lead pipes. So I was proud to be able to be a part of that process, to work with that bipartisan task force to move legislation forward. I was a co-sponsor of all of the bills that were introduced. I sat in countless meetings about the drafting of those pieces of legislation. And I was excited that once we were able to get them to the floor of the state assembly, that 10 of those 13 passed with bipartisan support. And they're really important things to our community around drinking water and water quality. So I was excited to be a part of that process and in the future move forward to help address it.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. We'll start with you on this next question. Please describe your position on school choice in Wisconsin, including whether you would support reducing, maintaining, or increasing numbers of vouchers available for school choice.
Yeah, so I'm a public education school kid. I went to school. I was born here in Green Bay, but I went to a public school up in Marinette. Went to the university system at UW-Oshkosh. I've been a strong supporter of public schools throughout my time in the state legislature, and really support the call for fully funding our public schools and supported the governor in that call. I believe that we need to cap the voucher system that we're moving forward with. That was recommended by the governor in this last state budget. I fully support that cap. Also, as a county supervisor as well, I worked for voucher accountability. I introduced a resolution that would put voucher transparency on the tax bill here in Brown County. Unfortunately, we found out throughout that process that we needed state action. So once I became a state legislator, I signed on to that bill for voucher accountability. I believe we should have that transparency. We should see it on our tax bill. And, we should make sure that we're not funding two separate school systems here in the state of Wisconsin. So thanks for the question, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. Ms. Shelton.
This is such an important question. I'll tell you, as a teacher and being the vice president on the Green Bay School Board, this has significantly impacted not only our district, but districts all over the state of Wisconsin. Here's the truth. $350 million of our taxpayer money has gone from the voucher program to private schools that quite frankly have less accountability, less transparency than our public schools do. It is a system that is not equitable. It is a system that is unsustainable. I don't just want to put a cap on it. I want to sunset the program entirely. And I fully understand that parents they do need to have a level of hearing their voice, and that some parents are frustrated perhaps with their local school system or their local school. But we've got to be working within the public school system as it stands, reimagining what that looks like, ensuring that learning is student-centered, that special education is fully funded. Right now, we are funding special education at 25%. And what that means for our school board is we have to take money out of our general fund and move that into a different fund to cover that cost. So this is not just impacting, school systems at a high level. This is impacting the services and the supports that all of our kids are getting. So I would absolutely work to sunset that program. I think it's been to at a detriment to not just our students and our teachers and our staff, but to our families and our communities. And I look forward to working on that once I'm elected to the assembly.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. We'll start with you on this question. Would you support a system whereby, to avoid gerrymandering, the Nonpartisan Legislative Reference Bureau would draw proposed legislative districts? The legislature would approve the maps and the public would have opportunities to be involved in the process. So please explain the rationale for your response.
Absolutely, and I love to see the governor's strong leadership on this issue, bringing forward the ability to, for people to participate in a nonpartisan, independent People's Commission to take the 2020 census data to draw new maps. The maps that we have are unconstitutional, and on top of that, we're wasting taxpayer money on lawyers trying to fight something that isn't right for the people. It doesn't hold democracy, and it doesn't allow the people to choose their representatives. I think that it's, we see gerrymandering here in the 90th district. I see it when I talk to voters and they say to me, quite frankly, why does it matter if I vote? It's going to be a Democrat anyways. You are all the same. It doesn't matter if it's this person or that person. So I think it speaks to voter apathy, low voter turnout. The wide ranging and deep consequences of gerrymandering go far beyond anything that any research platform or that piece of data can tell us. But there's great other models at other states around the country that we can look at. But I applaud the governor. I'm excited to see where this goes. And, we've got to uphold our Wisconsin values and our progressive history and demand fair maps because it's what the people deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Grzinski.
Yeah, the 90th Assembly District is gerrymandered, full stop. I mean, this district was created to make sure that several other districts around it could lean just a little bit more Republican. You see the packing that's happening in this district with Democratic votes. I'm proud to be the one in this race that has a proven track record on this issue. As a county board supervisor, I worked with other supervisors to make sure that we could create an independent commission for redrawing our maps. I think it's incredibly important. It's one of the first bills that I supported and that was introduced in the state assembly this last year. We've got to make sure that we are redrawing the lines here in Wisconsin. And I do also commend the governor for introducing his task force as well. I truly believe that this is an issue that if we're going to cut through the partisan gridlock, if we're going to actually get people to start to work together again, we need to make sure that we have fair maps and make sure that representatives are running in districts where the people are electing them, not the other way around. So I'm excited to work on this issue in the next legislative session. We'll be approving those maps as we move forward. It'll be one of the biggest things we do next term.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. I'm going to try and get through 2 more questions before our closing. We got a little bit of a late start, so we might be going over just a little. I hope everyone bears with us. Starting with you, could you please describe, Mr. Grzinski, your position on state prison in Northeast Wisconsin? Do you believe that we should maintain the status quo, choose Green Bay Correctional Institute and not build a replacement prison, or close the Green Bay Correctional Institute and build another state prison in Northeast Wisconsin?
Yeah, this is an issue that as a state legislator, right when I was elected, we started to hear about it when it's something I also have gone and toured and walked through Green Bay Correctional with the chief warden and staff from DOC to see the problems, to see the safety concerns for the workers in that facility. We're looking at a 100-year-old facility. I strongly believe that that facility should be closed at some point. And also, I have a very strong track record of not expanding jails as a county board supervisor. So if we're going to build new, if that's something we're going to do it as a state, we've got to make sure that we move forward with serious criminal justice reform package here in the state of Wisconsin. During my first term, I was proud to co-author and support bills that would address expungement. They'd address crimeless revocations in this state. It would also increase earned release for our jail population. We're currently spending more on the Department of Corrections than on our prisoners than we are on our students in the state. And that's completely backwards and wrong. We need to look at the entire criminal justice system as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. Ms. Shelton?
Wait for the timer.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Absolutely, I agree with you, Stash, on this one. We need comprehensive criminal justice reform. We can't just look at the prison system or this one particular prison in a silo. We've got to see the issue as a whole. Look, the state is operating all of our prisons statewide at 133% capacity. That's unacceptable. So we've got to bring the prison population down. We've got to decriminalize and also legalize marijuana and cannabis. We've got to looking broadly at how people are getting caught up in the in the prison system. And look, it's great that Mr. Grzinski has gone and toured the prison. I actually know and friends with, deeply close with folks that have family members and friends that are incarcerated in that prison, and hearing the stories that come out of directly from them of the living conditions that we put our own people through, our fellow Wisconsinites through, whether they are serving a sentence or not. Everyone deserves to be treated as a person. They deserve to be healthy. They deserve to have a safe place to sleep and food that is nourishing and healthy. So, absolutely, we've got to be thinking about this from a bigger budget standpoint. If we can reduce our prison numbers, if it means that we've got to build something new to upgrade, we certainly should have that on the table, but it can't just happen alone.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. So we'll start with you. So what steps do you think we should take to address the police brutality against communities of color and marginalized communities?
Yeah. Wow, such a great and poignant and important question. I have been at the forefront of this issue for the past 4 years, speaking out about racial injustice, gender justice, and disability justice from the policing lens. I think we can all agree that we need safe, secure communities because that's what makes communities great. But we've got to listen to the voices that we're hearing in our, not only locally, but at the state level and nationally. And what they're telling us is that surveillance for them does not mean safety, is that heightened policing does not mean safety. And the data backs that up. There's no correlation between an increased spending in police and a decrease in crime. But what there is a correlation around is a decrease in crime and violence when we reduce poverty and give people good paying jobs. So we've got to understand, again, the larger system and the larger structure of policing and how that contributes or doesn't contribute to inequities of people who are caught up in the prison system, the people who are experiencing mistreatment from the police, and who are reporting that there is injustice there. So we've got to get to the root of the problem. I think this is an example, again, I brought up earlier, of the masking. Let's not ask the police to enforce something that they don't need to enforce, that we know will contribute to those statistics. Let's ask our other experts and invest across the board and lift people out of poverty and give them good jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Mr. Grzinski.
Yeah, so we've stood by for far too long without action from our state legislature. I was proud to support both the governor and lieutenant governor's call for policing reform. They had 14 different points that they introduced. I strongly support removing chokeholds, making sure that we have a bad cop police registry moving forward, and that we have that we remove no-knock warrants as well. Those are just a few of the things that were introduced by the governor and lieutenant governor that I think we need to accomplish. We need to come back together and meet as an assembly to get done. Also, we need to make sure that we're listening to the Legislative Black Caucus on this issue, because they strongly say that this should only be the first step, not the last one. And I completely agree with them on this. They're calling for investments in communities of color. They're calling for investments in our public schools. They're calling for investments in transit. They're calling for investments in jobs programs in the inner city. And I fully support those calls, and I will stand up and vote with them moving forward. And we need to take substantial action on this issue as a state legislature. And I hope we could do it before we reach our next term, because to me, that's waiting too long with what we're seeing going on across our country.
Thank you, Mr. Grzinski. And so Ms. Shelton started off, so you're going to start the closing, Mr. Grzinski. I would really ask, please keep all your comments about yourself in these closing comments. only. So we're going back to the 2 minutes. And Mr. Grudzinski, the timer's there. Whenever you start, it'll start.
Yeah, first off, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Throughout this debate and forum, I wanted to be clear that, as we move forward, and when I'm reelected to this seat, I fully expect my committees to be reassigned. It's something that we continue to hear that, isn't exactly accurate, because if my Democratic colleagues decide to not caucus with me, and that's their right, they no longer pick my committee assignments as we move forward. So I just want to make sure we're being clear about something that we continue to hear in this campaign. I am proud to be the legislator in this as we move forward here that has the legislative experience, that has 6 years of local elected experience, that's been able to take what I learned on the county board down to Madison to be able to reach across the aisle and get results for the city of Green Bay. I'm proud that I've been able to work in a way that puts the partisan bickering aside, that cuts through the red tape in Madison, and has been, been able to gain results for the city of Green Bay. And that includes being COVID response. It includes being able to pass the coal piles bill downtown to help with our economy and our environment. It also means introducing the elections bill, where we were able to reach across the aisle and push the Wisconsin Elections Commission on this issue during a pandemic. I'm incredibly proud of that track record as we move forward here. I think it's important to know that that's a big difference in this primary. Somebody that has the ability to reach across the aisle to get things done when the Democrats are deeply in the minority in the assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Grudzinski. And 2 minutes about yourself, Ms. Shelton.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who has watched today and will watch the recording once that's up. The issues that we were talking today are incredibly important. Now is the time for us to demand our representation. We cannot afford to have an empty chair at a table. We cannot afford to not have a voice on these issues. This campaign that we are running, that I am running, is built on bold, courageous solutions. Talking about climate change, talking about green jobs, talking about fully funded education, talking about Medicaid expansion and Badger Care public options. These are things that will transform our lives. These are things that we can do. I think a lot about what the story will tell about what we've done at this time, this unprecedented time that is in front of us. What will the story be told about what we've done and if we've risen to the occasion? That is what I'm asking you all to do, is not just for your vote, but to join us, because these issues can be done. They can be solved with people-first solutions that are common sense, that will not only make our lives better, but the lives of our children and the lives of our families for generations to come. But unfortunately, Mr. Grudzinski is not telling the truth. And that is very important for us to understand. We cannot put our representation on the line. I will work hard for all of you, even if we don't agree. And let me tell you, my background in education, community building, capacity building, coalition building has been around building a larger table with more chairs. I am not interested in partisan politics or partisan bickering. That will get us nowhere. But I will not speak, I will not, lower my voice on issues that I know we need to face and face head on. So I ask every one of you, if I haven't earned your vote yet, to please consider it. Reach out to me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer a call, to respond to a text. Visit my website. But I would love to earn your vote and represent you after and on August 11th. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would ask that all of our audience bear with me for a few closing comments, please. I have to thank the candidates for sharing your positions. And also thank you to the Greater Green Bay League, who helped make this forum